Hi everybody! Welcome to Hancock Park's Virtual Experiences. I'm here with Discovery Stories and we are going to learn about fish today. So I came out here today and as you can see I have a fish tank out here. You can see some of our fish swimming around. But let's find out what it's like to be a fish. What's it like to be a fish? Fish live in water, in lakes, ponds, and aquariums, just like the one we saw behind me, and even plastic bags, but not for very long, I hope, everybody. Your pet goldfish can live in a bowl. You can watch the goldfish slip over and under and hide in the castle, and hide among the water plants and glide quietly around in their underwater world. A fish's body is just right for living underwater, just as your body is right for living on land. You can swim, but a fish can swim better. A fish's sleek body is the perfect shape for swimming. Fins stick out from the fish's body. They help the fish to swim. A goldfish's tail pushes it through the water. 6 other fins steady, steer, or stop it. See all the difference? Now we all know that a fish has a tail, but that's actually one of its fins. It's called the caudal fin. And then of course we have fins down below, and then the dorsal fin up top that most people recognize. Most fish have skin that is covered with scales. Scales help fish to swim, too. The scales are hard and clear. They overlap like shingles on a roof. The smooth, slick scales let fish slide easily through the water. A clear slime covers the scales. It helps fish glide through the water, too. Scales and slime also help to keep a fish healthy. The stiff scales protect a fish's delicate skin from cuts and scrapes. Many germs in the water get stuck in a fish's slime, coating, and washes away before it can make it to the fish, make the fish sick. Both scales and slime keep water from seeping into the fish's skin. So fish are covered in scales, and that protects them. When fish swim, they swing their tails back and forth and wave their other fins. They look as though they are flying through the water. Have you ever tried to do that in the water, to swim like that, swim like a fish? You use that tail to push yourself. If you watch your goldfish, you can see it open and close its mouth all day and all night. They look like they're drinking water, but they're not. They're breathing. Now, when you breathe all day and all night too, but you can't breathe underwater like a fish does. Fish breathe with their gills, but you breathe with your lungs. So oxygen goes in, inhale, fill up your lungs. Carbon dioxide gets pushed back out, in and out. You breathe in. Air goes in your lungs inside your body. Your body takes in the oxygen that you need from the air, and then when you breathe out, the parts of the air that you don't need, leave. Fish need oxygen too. So we breathe oxygen and fish do too. But they get their oxygen from the water. Just as there is oxygen in the air, there's oxygen in the water. A goldfish opens its mouth and lets some water in. And when the fish closes its mouth, there it goes. When it closes its mouth, the water flows through the gills in the body. The fish's body takes the oxygen it needs from the water. Passing over the gills, the water then leaves the fish's body through the gill openings. For a goldfish, opening and closing its mouth is just like breathing in and out. So open, in, close, push it through, just like we do. Fish need food just like you do, but they eat underwater. At feeding time, watch your goldfish flip its tail. They'll race race to the top of the bowl, snap at the food, and gulp it down. They need only a tiny pinch of fish flakes each day. Good fish flakes are a mixture of ground up flies, fish, shrimp, crab, corn, oats, carrots, and vitamins. Yum. Probably not for me, but definitely for the fish. Fish in the wild do not have someone to feed them every day. So instead, many fish eat tiny plants and animals, so small that you'd need a microscope to see them. Then bigger fish feed on worms, crabs, shrimp, and other fish. And then usually the big fish eat medium fish, and medium fish eat small fish. This is part of what we call the food chain. Now, fish are cold-blooded. That means that their body temperature matches the temperature of the water around them. Now, be sure to place your goldfish bowl in a spot where the temperature can stay a steady 65 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit. This is the temperature that seems to make fish the healthiest. But you are warm-blooded. When you're healthy, your body temperature is about 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Your body stays that same temperature by itself, whether you're in hot or cold. So when it gets hot or cold, we do things to help cool us off, but we keep that same body temperature. Sometimes goldfish swish their tails and zip around the bowl. Other times they look as if they're stopped moving, but they haven't. Their fins are always moving, even when they rest. Fish don't sleep like we do. They rest by moving very, very slowly. Now, fish eyes are always open. They don't have any eyelids, so their eyes stay open even when they rest. Now, fish don't need eyelids like you do, and they don't need tears either. The water keeps their eyes washed. There is usually not enough light under the water to bother a fish's eyes. Be sure not to put your goldfish in the sun, because it might be too bright for them. So with our eyes, we blink our eyes, and our eyes are wet. That helps keep our eyes nice and clean. But fish don't need that. They're already in the water, and the water does that. Now with a sleek body, fins, scales, slime, and gills, a fish lives as naturally underwater as you do on land. Goldfish swim, breathe, eat, and rest in the water. They slip over and under their castle, hide among the water plants, and glide quietly through their underwater world. Now, many of you may have a fish tank at home. Maybe you have a fish tank like a goldfish bowl, or maybe you have a fish tank like I do here with many different types of fish. Now, if we look in here at the fish, you can see the tail. You can see my little zebra fish up there. Watch as they flip their tails to get them to move really fast through the water. Now, it's a little hard to see their gills because these are smaller fish, but we know with fish that they have their fins, they have their tail, they have their scales, and right behind their eye, that's where their gills are located. So here's a picture of a trout. So you can see the picture here. So again, the tail, we call that the caudal fin. And right behind the eyes, this is where the gills are located. There's a gill flap. There's a cover that covers the gills. The water goes in the mouth and then pushes out through the gills, and that's how they get oxygen. Now, with senses, we sometimes learn about senses. We know that we have 5 main senses. We can see, and we can hear, and we can smell, and we can taste, and we can touch. But we sometimes talk about our 6th sense. When we think about our 6th sense, it means that you can sometimes anticipate something. Well, guess what? Fish actually have a 6th sense. So they use those 5 senses like we have, but then they also have a sense organ right along the side of their body called the lateral line. Now, the lateral line actually helps the fish detect movement in the water. So they can tell if the water changes, and that is a sense that they have. So it's not just their sense of touch, but it's actually a sense. It's their sixth sense, and it's called a lateral line. All fish have it. Some fish, it's easier to see the lateral line on it. Other fish, it's kind of harder, but it is there. Now, let's talk a little bit about other parts of the fish. Now, this is kind of just a drawing of the internal parts of the fish. Now, they have the same kind of parts that we have, where they have heart, and they have a stomach, and they have intestines. But something that a fish has that we don't have is something called a swim bladder. Now, you might wonder how a fish can float in the water so much. So even if they're not moving their fins very much, they stay floating. That's because of this swim bladder. This swim bladder gets filled up with air, and it's actually, they're floating. So just like you might be swimming in the water and you wear floaties on your arm or you wear a life jacket, and that helps keep you floating in the water, that's what's inside their swim bladder. So sometimes fish, if they want to go down under the water and they want to stay down at the bottom, they don't have very much air in that swim bladder. But if they're up near the top, they can actually fill up that swim bladder. Now, where do they get the air to fill up that swim bladder? Remember, we said that there is oxygen inside of the water, so they can actually get that in there. Now, some fish that you may be looking for in our rivers out here, this is called a smallmouth bass. This would be a fish that you might go fishing for here in our rivers or up at the Great Lakes. You can see with this fish, you can see its mouth and its eyes, and right behind are the gills, and then you can see the different fins that this fish has. Okay? Another fish, this is called a salmon. Some people like to eat salmon, so this is when the people go fishing for salmon. This is the kind of fish that a salmon is, you can see. Okay. Now, here's one that is up in the Great Lakes that a lot of people like to be famous for. This is called a walleye. Look at how sleek this walleye is. See how it kind of looks like a torpedo? Walleyes are very fast fish. They can swim very quickly through the water. They're kind of shaped like that torpedo. Okay? Now, here's a perch. Look at how our perch is different than the walleye. Okay? Notice it's not quite as quick as a swimmer. So this is be more closer to like your goldfish. Kind of the fins remind me of a goldfish. Okay? Now, this is a fish. This is a very ancient fish. This is called a sturgeon. Sturgeon are very, very large fish. And they live near the bottom. They're in the deep parts of the Great Lakes, these sturgeon. Now, we talk about fish having scales, but a sturgeon's scales, their skin is very, very hard. It almost feels like armor. So if you've ever had like the knights in shining armor, a sturgeon's scales feel like armor on the outside. Now look at this fish. Fish come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. Look at this fun fish. This is called a Goby fish. This is another fish that we can find in Ohio, but look how big its eyes are in this fish. And then finally, another fish that we have, let me get that to come up over here, is, look at this, pike. Now, do you think a pike is a fast swimmer or a slow swimmer? Well, if you guess that it is a fast swimmer because it looks like a torpedo, you are correct. It is the fastest swimming predator. And guess what it eats? Look at this mouth. It eats other fish. Okay, so I hope everybody enjoyed learning a little bit about fish. If you have fish at home, I want you to go ahead and take a look at your fish. Look for that caudal fin, which we know is the tail. Look for that dorsal fin, which is the fin that's on the top. Look for the fins on the bottom. Look and see if your fish is swimming fast through the water, or do you think it's sleeping, resting? It's just barely moving. And then if you get a chance, go ahead and feed your fish and watch your fish swim up there and see it get eaten. So, what's it like to be a fish? We learned a little bit about our fish here. On Wednesday, we have Way Back Wednesdays, where you get to learn a little bit more about the McInnes house and what it was like to be alive during pioneer time. And then don't forget, on Fridays, we have our Hike It, so that you can head out to one of our parks out there. Have a wonderful afternoon, and see everybody.